When people think about financial emergencies, they often imagine dramatic events. I'm talking about natural disasters, major illnesses, or even market crashes. Things that feel rare and extreme. But those aren't actually the emergencies that ruin most people's finances. The real damage usually comes from far more ordinary and predictable things that you'll learn in this video. I'm talking about everyday life, doing what it always does. Things that often don't feel serious enough to even plan for. That's what makes these emergencies so dangerous. They don't feel like emergencies until the damage is already done. And the first one we're going to talk about is the interruption of income. Not necessarily a permanent job loss. Actually, most often, it's something smaller. I'm talking about fewer hours, a delayed paycheck, a commission that doesn't come through, a short gap between jobs, or an unpaid sick week. These interruptions happen all the time and they don't feel dramatic, but they hit at the core of how most financial systems are built. Many people structure their entire financial life around income arriving on schedule. Bills assume it, debt assumes it, lifestyle assumes it. When income pauses or shrinks, even briefly, the clock starts immediately. Expenses don't slow down. For example, your rent still shows up and your minimum payments still hit. And without buffers, a lot of people are forced to react quickly. Credit sometimes fills the gap. Payments get delayed sometimes. And almost every time, your stress rises. What makes income interruptions so damaging is that they don't look like emergencies at first. People assume they'll catch up next month, but the system doesn't wait. And once behind, catching up takes far more effort than staying ahead would have. And for most of us, we have one main source of income, while dealing with dozens of sources of expenses. Let's talk about medical costs. When people think about medical emergencies, they often think about catastrophic illness or major surgery, but those aren't the medical costs that cause the most financial damage for most people. It's actually the smaller, more frequent ones. Things like deductibles, co-pays, prescriptions, diagnostic tests, follow-up visits, or even missed workdays. These costs don't arrive all at once, they trickle in, they spread out. And because each one feels manageable, people underestimate the total impact. Medical costs become an emergency not because of a single bill, but because they arrive alongside other expenses and income disruptions. And because many people delay care to avoid costs, small issues become bigger and more expensive later. Medical emergencies rarely announce themselves as crises. They quietly drain cash, increase debt, and add stress at the same time people are least able to deal with it. The next one is vehicle-related expenses. Those expenses are one of the most common and underestimated financial emergencies. Cars don't just break down in dramatic ways. They slowly demand money. Tires wear out, brakes fail, batteries die, and maintenance gets skipped until it can't anymore. And because transportation is tied directly to income for most people, vehicle issues create compound problems. A repair isn't just a repair, it's lost work time, missed shifts, extra transportation costs, and also stress about reliability. What makes vehicle emergencies so damaging is that they're predictable but never scheduled. Everyone knows cars will need repairs eventually, but the timing is always inconvenient. And when money is tight, repairs get delayed, which makes them more expensive later. Vehicle emergencies don't feel optional, and they don't wait for financial readiness. They force action, often at the worst possible moment. The next one is housing-related costs. Housing-related emergencies rarely come from dramatic events like fires or floods. They come from normal ownership and tenancy. Rent increases, security deposits, moving costs, repairs, appliance failures, plumbing issues, HVAC breakdowns. These costs are large, unavoidable, and very time-sensitive. Housing is usually the biggest expense in a budget, which means there's very little flexibility when something changes. You can't easily downgrade overnight. You can't pause housing costs while you figure things out. When housing-related expenses spike, they absorb cash meant for everything else. Savings disappear, debt increases, stress becomes constant. What makes housing emergencies so damaging is that they often force long-term changes. Higher rent becomes the new baseline. A repair becomes ongoing maintenance. A move becomes months of instability. Housing emergencies don't just disrupt finances, they disrupt life structure. Now, one of the least discussed financial emergencies comes from family and social obligations. Helping a relative, supporting a friend, traveling for funerals, emergencies, or caregiving. covering costs when someone else can't. These expenses don't show up in budgets, yet they literally happen all the time. And because they're emotional, people don't treat them like financial decisions. They say yes before thinking through the impact. And even when the amounts aren't huge, they often arrive at moments when finances are already stretched. Family and social emergencies are powerful because they come with pressure, guilt, responsibility, love, and opting out doesn't feel like an option. These costs don't feel optional, but they're rarely planned for. And because they're not official emergencies, people underestimate how much financial damage they can cause over time. Now, debt-triggered emergencies are emergencies that don't start with something going wrong in the real world. They start inside the financial system itself. A balance grows too large. Interest increases. A minimum payment rises. A promotional rate ends. Suddenly, cash flow doesn't work anymore. What was manageable becomes overwhelming. And because debt emergencies build slowly, people don't see them coming. They assume next month will be better. That income will catch up. But debt compounds quietly. And once debt becomes the emergency, everything else becomes harder to manage. A small disruption now has larger consequences. Not only do options shrink, but stress rises after as well. Debt-triggered emergencies are dangerous because they're invisible until they're urgent. And by the time they feel urgent, reversing course is much harder. The takeaway is that the financial emergencies that cause the most damage aren't rare. They're common. They're predictable. And that's why people don't prepare for them. They don't feel dramatic enough to plan around. Income interruptions, medical costs, car repairs, housing expenses, family obligations, debt pressure. These events don't feel like emergencies when they're happening. They feel like life. And that's often the problem. Financial damage doesn't come from what people fear most. It comes from what people dismiss. The emergencies that hurt finances most are the ones people don't take seriously until it's too late. Most of the time, people prepare against these financial crises with the use of emergency funds, meaning they have money on the side with the specific intent to be used when costly emergencies occur. Since they know emergencies are guaranteed to happen, they know it's guaranteed they'll eventually use the money they save for emergencies. Have you ever heard of someone never changing its car during its adult life? Or of a house owner who never had to do repairs? One of the unfortunate guarantees of life is that problems will occur at some point. And so, having money on the side to face these problems is one of the most common and smart financial habits to have. If you have a job, a beating heart, a car, a house, or a family, without even often realizing, you are at risk of very common problems on a constant basis. If this video helped you see financial emergencies in a new way, click on one of the videos on your screen right now. They go deeper into how financial stability actually works and how to protect yourself from the kinds of disruptions that happen most often. All right, I'll see you on the next one.